December 29th, 2019. Joe here at Simple Life Show. I appreciate everybody for joining me today. And as you know, the simplest answers are usually the best. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, do all the good social media stuff to keep the rational voices out in front where they belong. With me today is Sonia.
Hey, everybody.
I have been away for the last week, and Sonia's my wife, and she's been having some issues with her eyes. If anybody's have eye issues, then you really know what I'm talking about. It can be very frustrating. So even if you don't believe in God or anything like that, please send us your thoughts and prayers, because unlike some people, we do appreciate those. So today we're going to be talking about a little bit more about the Second Amendment crisis in Virginia. Virginia has been going through a Second Amendment crisis, and in fact, a lot of the militia groups have been growing rapidly over the past few weeks, if not past few months, ever since they have found out that the legislature was going to be switching over to a Democratic control. In fact, the moment that Democratic leadership actually took control, they decided they were going to put forward legislation for gun control. It seems like they already had that plan from the get-go, which can be kind of concerning when we're talking about the Second Amendment. And if you don't know really what I'm talking about, I do have 3 other videos where I've been talking about the issues going on in Virginia, what the consequences of that might be, along with Governor Northam's issues with calling in the possible calling in of the National Guard. And my last video was a little bit boisterous. I was a little bit mad about what was going on. I'm a little bit more calm now, but I think over the next few days, especially when the new 2020 year starts, this is when everything is going to go down. So that is coming up in a few days. So buckle up, everybody, because as I said in my first video, I believe that Virginia will be the ground zero for a lot of things coming up. And just like I had mentioned before, the militia groups are growing. They are really growing at a rapid rate. We've always had militia groups in this country. And it's, I think that is the backbone of the last line of defense, I believe, especially if the military or something, becomes compromised, or, our own government becomes compromised, which I believe it is. There's a lot of crony capitalism and crony politicians in office right now that do not have our best interest at heart. So I believe that it's really important to keep the militia alive, because law-abiding citizens who do own guns will and will always be the last line of defense against tyranny in this country. Those who believe in the Constitution understand this as a foundational thing. This is not something to be taken lightly, and it's just something that needs to be discussed openly in the open forum, and not to be suppressed in any way, because our freedom of speech, which is the First Amendment, is the foundation of both those as well. So Fox News recently had one of the sheriffs on that was recently deputizing a lot of citizens. He has approximated that several thousands of people have come forward already to be deputized. Now, this means that a lot of the people are very concerned in Virginia, and they have been taking steps, especially in those sanctuary cities, to keep their guns. And it's not just because people are just gun-loving idiots and Republicans or hillbillies or whatever you want to call them. It's not hard to understand this. You could be a Democrat, you could be a liberal, you could be a conservative, you could be a libertarian, you could be anybody. It's a natural right for people to protect themselves, and that is why it's the Second Amendment. So we're going to be discussing that here. I have a clip. Fox News. They recently had this sheriff on. He's going to be kind of breaking down how this deputization is going to be working. So I'll play that here for you now.
His county if the state legislature passes new gun control measures. Culpeper County Sheriff Scott Jenkins says that he would screen thousands of people to make sure that they would be allowed to keep their firearms.
The county already agreed to declare itself a Second Amendment sanctuary, joining at least 40 others in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And right now, Culpeper County Sheriff Scott Jenkins joins us live from D.C. Sheriff, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Clearly, you don't like what could happen in your state legislature there in Virginia. So how would you deputize anybody who would like to be?
A sheriff is allowed to deputize full-time, part-time, as well as auxiliary deputy sheriffs. And that's something I hope will not have to come to pass. But if the legislature does pass the bills that they intend, then that's likely to happen in Culpeper.
So what are the Democrats in the legislature, what are they proposing?
Many of the things you saw from the Clinton era gun ban, high-capacity magazines, as well as the so-called assault weapons, as they describe them, and many other things as well. And that doesn't even include the red flag laws that may be included as well.
Right. And so clearly you feel whatever the legislature does, citizens have a right to bear arms, and so that's why you're up for deputizing anybody. But you know, there are probably some people in your county who should not have a gun. So how are you going to screen those people?
They'll be properly vetted through a normal process, everything from normal background checks that we do for other deputy sheriffs, as well as even psych evals and things of that. It's not just a blanket policy of swearing in anyone who's interested, but we have a lot of law-abiding citizens, thousands that have concealed carry permits currently, and you know, I can tell you those aren't the people in the community that we're concerned about.
Right.
Would they have to go through classes or some sort of a training if you deputize them?
Yes, our current deputies, auxiliaries, they have to volunteer at least 8 hours or more a month in service to the office. They do have to attend certain training and so forth. There's a lot of different duties we have them perform at no charge to the community that they're a big asset to us. The current auxiliary force we have is over a couple dozen, and we're looking, if need be, to grow that by thousands.
Yeah, no kidding. It could be thousands of people who are interested. So, Sheriff, what is the reaction been to not only being essentially a Second Amendment sanctuary county, but also deputizing thousands of people to, you know, with their essentially an extension of the sheriff's department?
It's been strong, overwhelmingly in our community, strong support, and across the Commonwealth and even across the nation. I've received comments from sheriffs and citizens all over the nation in support of this, pushing back against this overreaching agenda that we have. And, you know, I see it as it's the responsibility of a sheriff to work within the law. I said from the beginning, not knocking other sheriffs or other positions people take, but I'm not going to stand and say that I won't enforce duly enacted laws by our legislature. I took an oath and I take it seriously. But when it comes to constitutionality and things, I look at that opportunity to swear in deputy sheriffs as a way that legally I can push back on that right for my citizens to defend themselves and bear arms.
Would people get a badge?
Yes, they'd have credentials as far as ID and badge and so forth after their oath of office and so forth.
I think it's great. That's really cool. Thank you, Sheriff, for being with us.
Okay, so you heard from the sheriff there, one of many sheriffs in Virginia that is trying to explain to Fox News. Now, I'm not a proponent. I'm not going to cheerlead for Fox News. Okay, if I'm watching the news, yeah, I'm probably going to be spending the majority of the time, if it's mainstream media, on Fox News. However, like other rational thinking adults that's able to use their brain, I am going to be going to several sources to get, you know, my news and what's really going on. And I try to form my own opinions that way. And of course, we live in a world right now where the media has been divided and there is not really too much. If you look at some of the political stances on a lot of the mass media out there, you will see that it looks like a tree and there's not so much of a trunk. It's just, you know, a whole bunch on the left and a whole bunch on the right. And that's really where we're at right now. But I digress from that. I mean, if you don't watch Fox News, that's fine. If you watch CNN or MSNBC, you will probably get more of a left-leaning stance on what's really going on and how it's important to protect the children, to protect, you know, the population as a whole. And if you do not agree with that, if you do not agree with the violation of the Second Amendment, that means you hate children, you hate the elderly, you're a Nazi, and you should die. This is not hyperbole. There's a lot of people out there that are saying this about people who support the not only the NRA, but more specifically, obviously, the Second Amendment. We've all seen the videos out there of people who have, you know, the picket signs that you have blood on your hands. The NRA is responsible for child murder. I think it's kind of hypocritical, though, when we have these types of protests and stuff like that against the NRA and other pro-Second Amendment groups, where you have other types of protests that are advocating for the murder of children. And I think this is really hypocritical on the left. Of course, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance coming in from those on the left. Now, if you know who I am and you've been watching my videos, you will know that I am, or at least I was, a Democrat. I still believe in some of the things that the Democratic Party does say, but as most people who have left the Democratic Party, I did not leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. And that left us with Trump. And this was something that a lot of people are, obviously upset about. But I believe Trump has done a lot of things that is good for this country. Yes, he has stuck his foot in his mouth many times. There's a lot of things that he has said that I do not agree with. I am not a rabid Trump supporter, just as much as I am not a rabid anything in my life. I look at everything from a rational point of view.
As you should.
Absolutely. So moving forward here, this was from December 26th, just a few days ago. Another Virginia county says it won't abide by new gun laws. Can it do that? This is a really common question that's really coming up here because a lot of people have, they have some misconceptions about what is constitutional and what's not constitutional, especially when it comes to law enforcement. So if and when they will pass this legislation, and I believe there will probably be more writers on this legislation when they actually pass it in January. Northam is on board with this. Obviously, he is very rabid anti-Second Amendment governor in Virginia. I was actually thinking about moving to Virginia until all this stuff happened. So I'm kind of reserved in what I'm going to be doing over the next year. I might have to choose another more pro-amendment Second Amendment state. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm kind of leaning towards not going to Virginia now.
I mean, Virginia basically, as long as you were outside of city limits and you weren't shooting at the roads or at anybody in particular, you could pretty much do anything and shoot anything.
Yeah, I think really the backbone of this country is formed by guns, and whether you like it or not, this country, the inception of this country was really by the armament of the population. If the population wasn't armed, say back in the mid 1700s, when the American Revolution was just beginning, and a lot of the patriots were signing up in a lot of the colonies, if people were anti-Second Amendment, they just didn't believe in guns and stuff like that, then we wouldn't be the nation that we are right now. Just like any other nation, nations are formed more or less on violence, and that's just our human nature. But really, the question is this constitutional? Do the cops really have to abide by this? Because when they pass this, yes, those who have AR-15s, because at least if they are registered AR-15s, because that's what they are going after. They're going after the AR-15s, the AK-47s, and all other byproducts of that. When I say byproducts, because the law itself, as it's written, is very abstract. It's very obscure because it's just. It doesn't really doesn't say what specific models. It's just military type this or assault type or assault style this. It really just depends. And if anything about the Supreme Court and what they have done with gun laws, the most recent one, I guess it would be DC versus Heller, where they determined that those guns that are in the primary use or the majority use in the population those are the ones that would be protected the most. Now, it is a fact that AR-15s are the most commonly used weapons in this country. We could probably follow that up with maybe 9mm or maybe 911s or 1911s and stuff like that. Very commonly used, and we're really just talking about long rifles and those types of weapons. But we all know that. We all know the arguments against this type of legislation because the majority of gun crime really isn't crime at all. It's suicide. If we're talking about murder or deaths by guns, it's really suicide by pistol. And I really think that we really need as a nation to really go back to really focusing on mental health more than anything else. We've heard that over and over. I think it's become an ad nauseum type of talking point. And the more that we talk about it, the more it gets diluted. And I think that's kind of a weird thing, but it's just really something that we really need to keep talking about because we wouldn't have a lot of this abstract kind of violence going on if we did have more of a focus on mental health. I really think this is something that we really need to talk about into the future as well. But as far as constitutionally speaking, do the cops really have to enforce these laws? And the answer really is not. They do not have to enforce these laws, even if they are passed by the legislature. If it goes against the Constitution, then you do not have to follow it. That is part of our Constitution. If a law that is passed it violates the Constitution, if you're a law enforcement officer or any kind of ward of the or a servant of the government, you do not have to enforce those laws. That is key in this entire argument. Now, Northam and a lot of his other
choose to, though.
They can choose to enforce the law. Now, that really just depends on if they. Now, Northam really has been putting forward a lot of other stuff where if the law enforcement officers do not or they violate their oath of duty or whatever you want to call it, then they'll lose their job or be suspended and stuff like that. You have a lot of people that will be afraid of the consequences of not doing this. So, when you got to put food on the table, well, I guess it's time to go door to door and just start taking guns from people and risk being shot, because this is going to happen. People will not willingly, release their guns. I don't care who you show up with or who's at your door. Many people are very, very rabid Second Amendment supporters, as well they should be, and they will not go quietly into the night. So
It's
this
fundamental, basic constitutional right.
It's a fundamental human right, really. The Constitution really doesn't even have anything to do with this. The Constitution is not what gives us our rights. The Constitution reinforces our inalienable rights given to us by our Creator. And we talked about this in previous videos where we talked about inalienable rights, because I really just think that this really gets kind of lost in the shuffle. That, I realize that there's a lot of people out there that don't believe in a creator, a God, or anything that's above them, and the state is their God. The state really wants to be your God. They are positioning themselves as your God. And this is really how tyranny is formed. This is how communist states are formed. I've done a lot of videos on the influence of communism that's still in our country today, albeit it's kind of underneath the rug as much, but it's infiltrated every room of the proverbial house. It is not so much banging on the door anymore. It's inside, and it is infecting everything through lobbyists, through different types of groups. And we're going to be talking about the different groups that do have some sort of influence as well in our country. I'm not going to try to make this as too long, because I know that even though this is a very hot topic and stuff like that, there's a lot of stuff going on that we need to cover. So this is a map here of the sanctuary map that was put forward by, I guess it's Phil Van Cleve. It's the VCDL. This is the Virginia Citizens Defense League, and they put forward this map of all of the sanctuary counties that are in Virginia right now. All of them are in green. So if that doesn't show you how serious the population is about this, I don't know what. The last time I heard that in any kind of government, that it's the will of the people that really matters. It's the will of the people that elects their representatives. And the representatives are not doing their due diligence in doing what the people want. This should be their first clue when a lot of the people are declaring Second Amendment sanctuary counties inside the state of Virginia. Not only that, but also going forward into deputizing themselves through or being deputized through the law enforcement agencies. So this is really just something. Now, this was on the 24th. This is a couple of days ago, about 4 days ago. Well, today's the 29th, so that would be 5 days ago. But the black areas in here, I don't know if I believe these are going to be some of the urban areas that I believe one might be Norfolk or something like that. Some of the urban areas are probably not going to be signing on because they are under a lot of Democratic control as well. That's not a big surprise. So that is where we are. This is something that's very interesting as well. It's from law enforcement today. And I had been hearing about this just a little bit, and I decided to look into it. So Virginia does increase the corrections budget in preparation for arrest of gun owners and police, right? So if the police do not do their what they're supposed to do. I'm sorry, I'm tongue-tied. If they're not supposed to do their duty to take the guns away from the population, of course, they are subject to the same laws and the same consequences. So this was actually posted on the 26th from Law Enforcement Today. I will put a link in the description as well, so you can take a look at that. This is from Ralph Northam is not trying to disguise what he's doing anymore. We all know that. Of course, we all saw the scandal, of course, with the blackface, and he just got away with that scot clean. It was, it was in the news for maybe a day, and then now we just don't hear it anymore, right? So along with anti-gun Democrats, allies in the Virginia General Assembly have passed a series of gun control measures that many in the state believe will lead to confiscation of firearms. With help of anti-gun zealot Michael Bloomberg's group, Everytown. If you don't know anything about Everytown, please look into it, because it is from Michael Bloomberg, who is now running for the presidency. Michael Bloomberg is probably one of the most dangerous people alive, because he has a lot of money, and he's a liberal. He's an anti-Second Amendment zealot, and he is behind, at least he's funding this Everytown for gun safety. Now, who couldn't be for gun safety, right? That is what a safety trigger is for. That's what safety is for. That is as far as I go with gun safety.
That's education. Knowing how to treat it.
Well, absolutely. The NRA is all about, at least was all about that until they started, with this whole thing of taking away people's guns. The NRA was exclusively for teaching young people how to properly fire weapons and how to care for them. Now the NRA is really about trying to lobby. Of course, that's what they do. The members of Congress and the Senate and the representatives in their respective districts to continue to defend the Second Amendment. It is not about crony capitalism when it comes to that. It's about protecting the Constitution. So this is really something that really needs to be looking at. I didn't have a chance to really look into this too much, but the LET, which is Law Enforcement Today, has reported over the last few weeks that gun owners in Virginia, along with some law enforcement officials, have become increasingly concerned that the series of laws are in essence a run on the Second Amendment. An overwhelming majority of counties in Virginia have declared themselves sanctuary cities. In response, the Attorney General, the Virginia General Mark Herring, said the resolution establishing sanctuaries were part of an effort by the gun lobby. Of course, they always want to put it to the gun lobby as if it was just an idea from the gun lobby to protect the Second Amendment, right? And added that the resolutions have no legal effect. So he's basically saying that just because you're saying that you're a sanctuary city means that there's no legal effect there. I really wonder, does this really, what about sanctuary cities for refugees or illegal Americans or illegal, I'm sorry, they're not even Americans, illegal citizens and stuff like that of other countries? Does this apply to the sanctuary cities for that? Also, where in the Constitution does it say that someone has a right to cross a border into a sovereign nation and collect benefits? I mean, this is really getting out of hand.
What about the counties that don't want to require people to have, those emission tests on their cars? I mean, because that's a law that's required by federal law to get federal funding.
I think that we have entered a time, in this history of this country where Americans, patriots or not, are becoming too reliant on the government to tell them what they can and cannot do. This country was formed on the idea of autonomy, of freedom, and unlimited government interference into our lives. That is why we have a constitution. That's why we have a bill of amendments and stuff like that. That further just kind of draws out where the line should be drawn. The Second Amendment isn't about granting the right to have an arm. If you want to reread it, it doesn't say that. What it says is that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. It is a letter. It is a love letter to the government, saying that you shall not do this. This is something that you are not allowed to do. Now, if you're a violent criminal, okay, now there's always caveats to this. If you're a violent criminal, you've had a history of using weapons and stuff like that for bad stuff that's not protecting yourself and your family, then I don't believe that you should have the right to have a gun. Now, if you have paid your debt to society. You spent time in jail for what you have done. I believe that your constitutional rights should be restored. I don't believe that people should. That's what the justice system is all about. The justice system is about reformation and to re-enter people into society after they have paid their debt. And I believe that all of their rights should be restored. Now, of course, the Democrats want to start restoring rights to criminals while they're still behind bars. They want them to be able to vote and all this other type of stuff. So, I mean, it doesn't go both ways. And I think that the Democrats and the liberals have been deluding the public as well as themselves for a long time into believing this false type of utopia that is based on a lie. And if you know anything about other videos I've done, that I know you should know that I firmly believe that the communist type of ideology has been infiltrating in this country for a long time. If you haven't read any of the books on this, please look back in a lot of my videos. There's a lot of good resources there to look at, including I believe it's called the 45 Communist Goals. There's 45. There used to be, I believe, 60. I think they dwindled it down to 45. This was written back in the 60s and 50s or 60s, I believe. And there is, a good 95% of those goals have already been accomplished, either within the last 50 years or, even now. We do see this as being one of the biggest goals of a communist state, is disarming the population, because if you have a disarmed population, then everything else falls as a result. People cannot protect themselves from their government, and a lot of people want to laugh at this. They really do. They say, "Well, the government isn't going to come and just kill you." That's never happened in any kind of society. The government hasn't ever killed any of their own citizens. They have never starved any of their own citizens. We just see it every single day. But we live in a type of microcosm bubble inside of this country where we have this. It's so weird. We have this type of delusion, I guess, where we've been so used to the freedoms that we do have that we believe there's no way possible that those freedoms could be taken away. And we're living under this delusion, and it's preventing us from seeing the beginning cycles of a lot of these removals of the rights that we do have.
I mean, think about it. I mean, you see evidence that they've already tried this once and almost succeeded. They did succeed for quite a while with all these reformatories that you see. They have ghost adventures, always searching them because all these people were put in there. But they talk to you about the cholera, but then they after the cholera outbreaks, they started putting people in there that were less than desirable.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to consider the Tuskegee experiments with the diseases that were injected into the black population, unknowing to the black population at the time. But it's a similar thing that whenever someone wants to talk about World War II, they want to bring up Auschwitz, but they never want to talk about all of the Japanese concentration camps we had here in the States. No one really wants to talk about that. And I'm sure there's a lot of Japanese people that are still kind of sore over that, especially, since it wasn't too long ago. It was only like 60, 70 years ago that we had concentration camps in this country. It's not only that, but it's also the fact that even now, since we're talking about World War II a little bit, we'll talk about Auschwitz, we'll talk about that. But as a side note, people, like I said in a lot of my other videos, that the U.S. was kind of drawn into to World War II by the British. I don't believe that really wanted to go to World War II, but we were still on the cusp of getting over the Depression and stuff, and it seemed like a really good idea, but that really wasn't what caused it. But, as far as protecting the Jews, of course, that were in these concentration camps, we really didn't do anything. And a lot of people don't realize that we did fly over a lot of these concentration camps, didn't drop one bomb. And a lot of Jews are still pretty sore over that, especially because we were under Democratic rule at the time. So if you want to worship the Democrats, if you want to worship the liberals that want to take away guns, please understand this, is that they do not have your best interest in heart. They want control. And that's really you can't really boil that down anymore. It's concentrated control. So moving forward here, we're going to be talking a little bit more. I am probably not going to, since I have droned on and on about some of these things, I'm not going to be talking about some of this stuff. If you don't know who Representative Matt Shea is, he was recently suspended here. Is he representative? And if you don't remember, back in 2014, the Oregon Reserve was taken over, and that got a lot of news, media, press, and so forth. This was something that was in the media a lot, and it really had to do with the land rights that were in Oregon. And there was a lot of militia that showed up. I believe 1,500 to 2,000 members actually showed up to in support of Clive and Bundy. So most people do remember that. It wasn't too long ago. I know our memories are a little bit short. I know mine's a little bit short, but we need to remember these things that happened. So this representative, Matt Shea, just recently he wasn't censured. He was actually suspended for this, and there's actually a investigation going on into him for political violence and I believe terrorism charges and stuff like that, domestic terrorism, because they feel, or I guess those who are bringing charges against Matt Shea feel that he was instigated a lot of the violence and a lot of the militia showing up through a lot of his posts on social media and how involved he got into it. Now, Matt Shea does, if you look at his Wikipedia page, I don't have his Wikipedia page up, but he is described as, I believe, a Christian supremacist. That's the first time I've actually seen someone described as a Christian supremacist. That's a new one for me. But I guess since there was I believe back in 2000, I don't know what year it was, but he actually put out what was called hold on for a second. All right, so Matt Shea speaks publicly. So he spoke publicly in a radio show, first time since his suspension, but he did put out what's called the biblical basis for war. Now, a lot of people were in an uproar over this since he put this out, and some saw it as a call for war against the government. I think that there is some types of arguments that can be said that this was a type of call for war, because if you do look past this, it's not so much a sermon as it is almost a blueprint for a holy war. If we look here at the top, God is warrior, biblical-based war. When is it time for war? When God says it's time. Fight to win so you don't have to fight again. We have 4 things to stay within God's will. We have 4 ways to know it's time to fight. Things for holding. What I thought was actually, I read through this, I thought was actually kind of interesting here, was that there was 5 exemptions for service, training family, newlyweds, farmers, sacred, priest, so forth. We also have here rules for war, conducted census of all able male bodies. There was some other stuff in here that was really interesting. If they do not yield, kill all males. I don't know if he is referring to the enemy or is actually someone that's refusing to fight. I think that he is probably referring to whoever the enemy is. I don't know if that dilutes it anymore, but it still is concerning. So this is I believe a 3 or 4 page document here. We have organizational structures for war. We even have team leaders. We have designations for certain types of leadership roles here: captains, team leader, squad leader, platoon leader, battalion commander. Okay, so obviously this is a little bit disconcerting when we see it. I'm not a hypocrite, okay? There is a lot of the same stuff going on with the Islamic world that is infiltrated. I'm not going to say the Islam or the Muslims are infiltrating. I believe that the ideology is infiltrating into this country, and as well as the Sharia law is infiltrating into this country. Like I said, I'm not a hypocrite. When I look at this, I see some issues. I think that the whole holy war thing and Christians taking up arms against their government, I think there could be a time for that. We have to really think about history. We have to think about what happened in World War I, World War II, or any other conflict for that matter, especially when we're dealing with tyrannical dictators. We haven't got to the point of a tyrannical dictator yet. I'm not saying that it's beyond the horizon. I'm not saying that this is beyond possibilities, because we both know that is within possibilities to have a tyrannical type of government inside this country. The problem is that by the time we do have a tyrannical government in this country, it'll be too late. And the reason why is because our power is separated between three branches. We do not yet have a dictator. But at the same time, we could have one or more of these types of branches just kind of do their own thing, especially if there is agreement between all the branches to do whatever the hell they want to do. That is the problem that we're running to, and even the four founders knew this when they were drawing up the articles as they are. So it's not a perfect thing. But when we're talking about a tyrannical type of government, we probably wouldn't ever have a type of dictator unless someone took over this country, unless China took over, unless Russia invaded and took over. Yes, we could possibly have a dictator. I believe Putin probably is a dictator. You know, he's been in power for how long? I believe that the leader in China, I'm having a brain fart, can't remember his name, but Winnie the Pooh himself. And I believe he is a dictator himself. He has autonomy. He does whatever he wants. We all know that Kim over in North Korea, he is a dictator. He does whatever he wants. We keep saying that it could never happen in this country, but I believe that's false. That's really false thinking because of the way our government is set up. I believe it's always going to have a loophole. I believe it's always going to have a crack or a backdoor into some sort of tyranny. And now, when I say tyranny, I'm not talking about dictatorship. I'm just talking about the government acting as the God state and acting as the Godhead, telling you what you can and cannot do with your body, what you cannot do with your family or your children or anything else. We're already seeing that. We do not have to have a dictator to have a tyrannical government. That is a common misconception. So as far as this goes, with this Matt Shea, yes, I believe that this whole manifesto is very concerning. Especially, from identifying with the Christian faith. I do not agree with this. I do not agree that we should take up arms and stuff like that against our own government, unless that government decides it wants to scrap our own inalienable rights given to us by God. If the rights given to us by God are nullified, then we are, along with every other rational human being, just like anyone else, regardless of your religion, needs and must and compelled to fight back against that tyranny. So I'm going to leave it right there, but we're going to move forward just a little bit further. Now, I did mention a few things about that's just another article about him. We're going to be talking about finally, since I'm not a hypocrite. We're going to be talking a little bit about the First and Second Amendment as it applies to the Muslim religion, Islam. And if you don't remember, back in 2015, there was a back in 2015 in Afghanistan, one of the U.S. soldiers actually requested 2 Bibles to be sent to him. And if you don't remember this, I don't, but I actually ran across this story in my research. But this soldier actually had 2 Bibles sent to him in I think 2 different languages. And as a result of the Bibles actually being sent to a U.S. military base, they were burned. The Bibles were burned. And we don't see this with the Quran or anything else, because the Quran is one of the primary books that's used in Afghanistan, because the majority of people there are Muslims. I don't have a problem with that. Okay, what I do have a problem with is that if a military soldier wants to have a Bible, then he should have a Bible. He is on a U.S. military base that happens to be in Afghanistan. So we do see a lot of these different things happening, okay? And how this all really kind of works together is, and also there was also another case same year that came across. This was from the Superior Court of New Jersey, and it was the SD versus MJR. And if you don't know what this is, I would highly recommend looking into it, because what happened was that there was two people. There was a Muslim couple, and one was accusing the other. The woman was accusing the man of raping her multiple times, and I believe they I don't even know if they were I don't know if they were divorced or something like that. Of course, Muslim law really works differently than it does. They go by Sharia law, especially when it comes to divorce. I think most of the time that they're compelled not to divorce because they bring shame upon their family and all that kind of stuff. And, the woman's never the same, unfortunately. So what happened with this is that she was accusing the man of raping her multiple times. And why this is such a landmark case, I believe, is because of what happened as a result. Point one, the trial court abused its discretion by finding that domestic violence had been committed, but failing to issue a final restraining order. So it found that the domestic violence, i.e. rape, had been committed, but did not issue a final restraining order. Why would that be? I wonder, would it have anything to do with Sharia law and how the Sharia law from the Muslims have been infiltrating into our court system? If you don't believe this, please look into this, because there's a lot of different types of courts and a lot of case law that has been, throughout the many years up until the present that has been that can show this to be the case. The second is the point two. The trial court abused its discretion by finding that defendants lacked the requisite intent to commit sexual assault and criminal sexual assault based upon his religion. Excuse me. So what the court literally found in this case was that because the defendant was Muslim, that he got to go free. Because it's part of his religion, right? And the court found this. How could this happen in the United States? How could this happen in a country that is all about justice for all, right? Isn't that part of what we say, and justice for all, right? Well, isn't that the last thing in the Pledge of Allegiance? Well, not supposedly in this case. And in many cases, for that matter, people are not getting justice, especially when it comes to Muslim Sharia law and how it's dictated, because there was a lot of courts that are doing this where they are simply allowing the Sharia law to either go forward or they are backing up with U.S. jurisprudence. So that is something to think about as well. Also, another thing to consider. Back in, I believe, 2000, this started happening, but Sharia compliant financial services, if you don't know what they are, there is a different way for Muslims to, or in any kind of Islamic world, to actually run their banking system. They do not believe in usury, which I don't believe in either. I think that banks should make a certain amount of profit to stay profitable, obviously, so they can grow and be able to help more people out and provide more loans to especially the small businesses out there. But this is an issue, I believe, and this is something that happened under Hillary, and when she was the first lady and stuff like that. Of course, she made a lot of decisions that she had she had no place to make when she was the first lady, just as much as she did when she was Secretary of State and all this other kind of stuff. She just kind of does her own thing, just as much as the Clinton Foundation kind of just did its own thing as far as laundering money and kind of ripping off the people of Haiti. If you don't know anything about that, look into that as well. So this is really just something that's been going on, and what's really kind of interesting is that this has been growing at an exponential rate. I don't have the actually here. Sharia compliant financial institutions and assets are growing rapidly. Estimated the economists at 19% growth annually until 2018, with the global assets at estimated $2 trillion. It's a lot of money. As the industry grows, the relatively large unbanked population in Asia needs financial services. Global standards for Islamic finance are emerging. So, what am I really talking about here? When I was talking about Matt Shea, we're really talking about how the Christians and those of the Christian faith and people that relate to Christianity or whatever, they are being silenced one way or the other. They are being demonized one way or the other. And it really also ties into the foundation of this country. The foundation of this country, whether you like to believe it or not, the founders were either Christian or they were theist or deist, however you want to look at it. And when they wrote this Constitution and when they wrote the Articles of Independence and the Declaration of Independence, they had specific things in mind. The foundation being that our inalienable rights given to us by God was first and foremost. Our ability to speak freely, our ability to protect ourselves. So this is not how it works in the Islamic world. I'll go forward here, and this is just something about the Islamic banks and Main Street here. It has a lot of different interesting type of close ties to Hillary Clinton paid by the Bengali. Okay, this, I'm not going to go into everything here. This is kind of since 2000, Islamic banks have become a force to be reckoned with. Islamic banks capital grew from 200 billion in 2000 to close to 3 trillion in 2016. Says the professor of international business at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. This figure expected to go up to 4 trillion by 2020 or in the 2020s. There are now more than 300 banks and 250 mutual funds around the world complying with Islamic principles. Please understand this. If you do not believe that that there is not an active infiltration of Islamic principles and Islamic ideology into this country, please take notice. Please start researching some stuff. I am not an Islamophobe. I have nothing against Muslims. I think they're fine to do whatever they want to do. But when they start getting involved and start trying to throw their weight around, not only in our traditions, but our Constitution, in our finance, and in our economics with their sharia compliant type of stuff, that becomes an issue to me, because if you know anything about Islam, there is no separation of church and state. There is absolutely no separation. They comply with their religion in everything they do. If you do not know about the ex, I guess the ex, I guess he is an ex. He is an ex Homeland Security Director. This was something different. Okay, the ex, his name is Mohammed El-Ibri. El-Ibri. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but moving on. He back in 2014, he had said that America was or is an Islamic country, and we actually have that tweet here. Well, hold on for a second. We have that tweet right here. Mohammed El-Ibri. This is American. Yes. 76 son or whatever that, I guess he's talking to someone else. And yes, I do consider the United States of America an Islamic country with an Islamically compliant constitution. I'm not exactly sure what that's referring to. Okay. Last I heard that the founding fathers were not Muslim. Okay. And they did not go by Sharia law. And that is all that is to be said about that. He has been very vocal and open about how Islam is taking a role in this country. And the final thing I really want to talk about here is Sharia law and gun control, just to kind of wrap everything up and kind of tie everything together. If you don't remember, back in France, when there was one of the I guess probably not one of the worst mass killings, but it was one of the most, I guess it was one of the saddest, really, because, and they're all sad, but when the Charlie Hebdo attacks, when that magazine actually, I guess they published the cartoons of Muhammad. If you remember that, there was a lot of gunmen, I believe 2 or 3 gunmen that showed up with AK-47s, and they killed people within the building and outside the building. It was a terrible tragedy, obviously, right? This was really concerning. This was posted 2015, right? After the attacks, obviously. And this is really concerning. I'm going to read this to you. Liberal democracy committed to freedom of the press. Islam is not. Here's an editorial that was run in USA Today by a man identified as a teacher of Sharia law in Great Britain. This man has clearly set forth the principles of Islam as they apply to freedom of the press. He was given freedom of the press by USA Today. We read, people know the consequences opposing view. He took this opportunity to send us a message about the consequences. So he's writing here, contrary to popular misconception, Islam does not mean peace, but rather means submission to the commands of Allah alone. So everybody's out there that's saying Islam is peace. They don't understand, because they do not study Islam. They are not a Muslim cleric or anything like that. They are not an imam. They do not know what they are talking about. Therefore, Muslims do not believe in the concept of freedom of expression. As well, they don't, as their speech and actions are determined by divine revelation, not based on people's desires. Although Muslims may not agree about the idea of freedom of expression, Even non-Muslims who espouse it say sometimes it comes with responsibilities. What are we constantly hearing from the liberal media? Oh, you have a right to speak, right? But it comes with consequences, right? You're going to have to pay the price to say that. You're going to have to pay the price to make that cartoon. You're going to have to pay the price. There's so many people being doxxed right now. So many people being erased from social media. So many people having their accounts deleted from social media. So many people getting death threats for simply saying something or an opinion about some sort of topic. That is the world we live in right now. If you don't believe that we are not becoming Sharia compliant, then you're living in La La Land, okay?
And you have to worry about if what you post on your Facebook or your Twitter for job interviews.
Absolutely, because it's a very common practice now that when you go into a job interview or any kind of job, they're going to check out your social media to see what kind of person you are. Okay, we are living in the Minority Report now. We are living in an area, in an age where the crime of having a thought that doesn't go along with the state-approved media and the state-approved type of the function and propaganda that's out there. If you're not agreeing with that 100%, then you're in trouble. He goes further by saying, in an increasingly unstable and insecure world, the potential consequences of insulting the Messenger Muhammad are known to Muslims and non-Muslims alike. You should know this by now. This is what he's saying. He should know that, hey, we've already attacked you. We have already killed plenty of your people. We have already run over plenty of the people. I know the people in Europe should know this by now. People in the UK should know this by now. People in this country should know this by now. Look at the Pulse attack. This was from a Muslim. He was very clear on why he did this. He did not agree with homosexuality. Okay, so that was one of the things I'm like, okay, are liberals' heads going to explode over this? Because are they going to run bat for the Muslim, or are they going to run bat for the gays? Which one is it? Because it can only be one, because they're not compatible with each other. I am not anti-Muslim. Please understand this. But what I am is pro-Constitution. I am pro-freedom of speech. Okay? If you are a fundamental Muslim, just as bad it is if you are a fundamental Christian or an extremist Christian who does not like gays or who does not like this and that and the other, I hate you. I hate you. You should not be like that. You should not even be in this country. People like people out of the, what is that church? That crazy church out there with those crazy people that God hates, those types of signs. Oh. Those are the types of people. You've seen them out there. They're still doing their thing. Okay, to talk to someone that's religious, believes in God and stuff like that, or even a Christian, and say that they condone of that just simply by pure affiliation would just be just as wrong by saying that Muslims, by pure affiliation, condone of Sharia law as well. But of course, there have been a lot of studies and a lot of stats that are available that I believe 25 to 30% of those who are practicing out there do condone of Sharia law. And I think that should be concerning. I don't think 30% of the Christians out there condone of what the Westboro Baptist Church is really doing out there. So, before my channel gets taken out, please understand, before you hit that dislike button, please understand that I am not anti-Muslim or anti-anything. I am pro-Constitution. I am pro-liberty. I'm pro-autonomy. I'm pro-choice. I am pro-everything. I am pro-freedom. And Sharia law it goes directly in contradiction to freedom. Okay, so moving on here, what he says: Muslims consider the honor of the Prophet Muhammad to be dearer to them than that of their parents or even themselves. They would rather die than insult the Prophet Muhammad. We know this. To defend this it is considered to be an obligation to them. They are obligated to do whatever it takes to stop those who insult the Prophet Muhammad. The strict punishment, if found guilty of this crime under Sharia or Islamic law, is capital punishment and implementable by the Islamic State. This is because the Messenger Muhammad said in the Quran, whoever insults the Prophet, kill them. They are taking their text literally, as just as much the extremist religions, all of them, if they take their text literally, would be out there killing people. I do not condone that. I think it's completely irrational and stupid. However, because the honor of the Prophet is something which all Muslims want to defend, many of them take the law into their own hands, as we often see. They get guns. They do this. If someone insults a Prophet Muhammad or someone that is doing something that's not in line with Sharia law, we've even seen this in New York with the Muslim patrols out there, right? Islamic, the Islam, whatever you want to call it, the patrols out there with Muslims who are basically enforcing Sharia law in their own neighborhoods. Now, you can say that they are just trying to keep people safe. I just don't buy it for a second. We have police out there that are paid to do this. We don't need someone out there doing that. We also have neighborhood watch and stuff like that. Now, this is not what neighborhood watch is. Here recently, there was an incident where the gang The Bloods actually got involved in this stuff, where this one of these Islamic patrols was actually out there. A young black boy was doing something they didn't agree with, and one of the patrol people got out of the car and roughed him up. Didn't beat him up. I think he actually put him against a wall. I remember in the story, it was just he roughed him up. Of course, he did not realize that this young boy was the son of one of the leaders of the Bloods. Not a good idea. So what actually happened is that there was an altercation between, I guess, a group of the Bloods, and they really beat him up bad. Okay, so they also said in parting that this wasn't over. They're going to keep doing this until they stop this type of patrol. I don't agree with violence, but even now the Bloods, right? Even now the gangs are tired of it. Let that sink in.
Violence is too much. What they're trying to do is too much for people that are in violent gangs where you have to get raped in or something. Now,
we understand there, we're talking about gangs and stuff like that. There's a lot of violence associated with the gangs, whether it's MS-13, the Bloods, the Crips, or whatever you want to call. I'm not really up on my gang lingo, but at the same time, I don't live in a very safe area either, but I also have an understanding that the majority of the gang violence does have to, come to, with drugs and drug deals gone wrong, stuff like that. Most of the time, they're not out there just shooting random people. Random people do get involved in this by just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's, I'm not an apologist for gangs, but as violent as gangs are, as anti-government and anti-justice and anti-judicial system as gangs naturally are, because they want to break the law, I think it's a time to actually stop and think when the Bloods are actually getting involved in this. They are tired of it. So, and I believe a lot of people are tired of it. So, going forward here, however, because the honor, okay, so they are taking the law into our hands. Within liberal democracy, freedom of expression has curtailments, such as laws against incitement or hatred. The truth is that Western governments are content to sacrifice liberties and freedoms when being complicit to torture and rendition, or when restricting the freedom of movement of Muslims under the guise of protecting national security. So why, in this case, did the French government allow the magazine Charlie Hebdo to continue to provoke Muslims, thereby placing the sanctity of its citizens at risk? It is time that the sanctity of the prophet, revered by up to 1/4 of the world's population, be protected, or was protected. I mean, if that's not the most disgusting thing I ever read in my entire life, I don't know what. Here's the issue I have with this scholar of Muslim studies, whoever he wants to be. Whatever information he believes is the most important to him at the time. Freedom, autonomy, and the freedom of speech, the freedom to protect yourself, that curtails all of your religious rights. Okay, that's really where it all ends. It doesn't matter where someone's making fun of the precious Muhammad, or even someone's making fun of Jesus Christ. I get upset, right? Just like the recent Netflix thing where they were making fun of Jesus and calling Mary a stoner and Jesus is gay and stuff like that. I mean, we see this constantly where Jesus is portrayed as a complete buffoon and stuff like that, or as a stoner, or just a miscreant, or stuff like that. People are constantly making fun of it. But am I saying that those people should be murdered because they make fun of Jesus? Absolutely not. That is their freedom to make fun of all religions. They can do that. Absolutely. I don't hate these people. I don't agree with them, but I don't think that people should be taking up their arms and killing them either. That is absolutely insane. That's my entire point here. Okay. The First and Second Amendment has to stay in place, because we do not want to end up like all these other countries that are simply afraid to offend people because they are afraid that these people will take up guns and just start murdering people. Okay. This whole thing. I mean, this whole thing was an issue before. I really haven't heard of it, recently, but I think we know why. I think we know why we haven't seen any cartoons of Muhammad, right? Because people in those countries, especially France, who had to go through the horrible Charlie Hebdo attack, they do not want to do that anymore because they don't want to offend anybody. We're going to end up in just unitards here soon, where everything's offensive, and we have to do anything to not offend anybody because we're too afraid they're going to take up guns to kill us. So that's why we need to be armed. That's why we need to be able to keep saying what we want to say. So we can wash all of these people out. If someone wants to take up guns, that's fine. Then I'll have my gun too. Until next time, this is Joe with Simple Life Show. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day. Bye.